welcome you to episode 376 of my podcast, Who's Paying Attention? And I want to say thank you to our sponsor for today's episode, Green Chef. Green Chef is the #1 meal kit for eating well, with dinners that work for you, not the other way around. So here's what you do. Go to greenchef.com/Alonzo135 and use code Alonzo135 to get $135 off across 5 boxes. And your first box ships free. That's greenchef.com/Alonzo135. Use code Alonzo135. You get $135 off across 5 boxes, and your first box ships free. Green Chef, the #1 meal kit for eating well. So we are coming up on a milestone. As to whether or not it's good or bad, I guess depends on which side of the aisle you're on. Mitch McConnell is becoming the longest running GOP leader in history. He's been in charge of the Republican Party in the Senate since 2007. Is that good? I don't think so. I don't think this is a win. I mean, you look at the beginning of his term, his thing was, well, here's the problem with Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell has always been party above country. That's the biggest problem. So right from the beginning, his thing was when he said that the goal of the Republican Party is to make Barack Obama a one-term president. He has achieved some of his achievements. Well, the country probably hasn't been this divided since the Civil War. We've looked at all kind of rights go away because of his political manipulation of the Supreme Court, not allowing Barack Obama nominee to even be vetted or attempted voted on to get onto the Supreme Court. And again, it's one of the things that I really was disappointed with Barack Obama about, not fighting harder for the Supreme Court candidate. But anyway, McConnell was in charge of that. McConnell got probably 3 of the 4 worst justices in history on the court. Definitely two, which would be the drunk and the handmaid, Kavanaugh and Amy, whatever the hell her name is. I don't even know. Clarence Thomas being the other one. Those are the worst. But anyway, McConnell's responsible for 2 out of 3. The middle class has been under attack and disappearing. I excellently manipulated poor working class and middle class white people to think that the enemy is black people or immigrants. And in the meantime, McConnell's Republican Party has created a new class of impossibly rich people, super rich people who conveniently don't have to pay taxes because they did away with that. And the super PAC, the whole thing with the Supreme Court declaring corporations to be people and therefore allowed to donate unlimited money to political campaigns, etc., which has led to these PACs and super PACs and all this money going into elections. And how much does McConnell care about America? McConnell's super PAC is backing Herschel Walker. That's right, pumping tons of money into getting Herschel Walker into the Senate. Why? Because Herschel Walker is qualified? No. And this isn't even a party thing by any stretch of the imagination, by any standard. Herschel Walker is not qualified to be in the Senate, whether it be his ridiculous statements about climate change or the whole, anti-abortion stance, religious evangelicals and all that. Meanwhile, he's paying for abortions for women. And I got no problem with that, other than the hypocrisy involved and them pretending that they care. All of this is under Mitch McConnell's leadership. So to brag and to look at being around even longer, they're saying he might give up the job in 2025. He might decide to give up the job. Oh, and here's another thing, and this is a problem we have on both sides of the aisle, okay, between McConnell and Nancy Pelosi. They're too old. McConnell claims to be 76. If he's only 76, he is a awful looking 76 years old. I don't believe that's how old he is. He's got to be older than that, right? But anyway, where he's been around since '07. He's going to be in charge for a few years more. Schumer congratulated him and talked about what a great job he did. What the hell is wrong with you, Schumer? What the hell is wrong with you? You're supposed to be a Democrat. You don't congratulate Mitch McConnell on what a great job he's done with the state of the country and everything that's going on, everything the Republicans have done to destroy the Democrats, the continued work to do away with Obamacare, et cetera, et cetera. You don't congratulate him. Man, you're doing a great... Shut up. Gee, just don't say anything. You don't have to congratulate him or not congratulate him, but just shut up. Don't say anything. He puts party above country. Okay, that means above the country that you represent. So congratulating him, Democrats, there's no race they can't surrender. It's unbelievable. The LA City Council is a mess, is a racist mess. It's come out now that these council members, Nuri Martinez, Gil Cedillo, and Kevin DeLeon, their racist phone call calling a black baby a monkey and saying so-and-so is F him because he's with the blacks. Wait a minute, I can curse. It's my podcast. They said, fuck him, he's with the blacks. And, after this pressure has come down, Nuri Martinez, first she resigned as head of the city council. Now she's resigning from the city council. And they've been called out by Biden and by the mayoral candidates. By the way, LA's having a tough mayoral race between Karen Bass and Rick Caruso, which is a whole nother issue, which makes this city council thing pretty bad. But Joe Biden, through his spokesperson, said one thing that was interesting, that the difference between Democrats and MAGA Republicans is if a Democrat is caught doing something racist, they resign, and a MAGA Republican is celebrated, which is true. For what it's worth. Good for him, I guess, for saying it. But here's the thing about this city council and these resignations, and this is the problem with this. How many votes has she, as the leader of the city council, and these city council members made that affect black neighborhoods, black people, black schools, public funding, et cetera, from the city council? How many times, how many issues have come up? How many things have they voted on in the time they're in? And then you find out they are racist and against black people. It's frustrating. This is when people talk about there is no such thing as systematic racism. This is the system. And the fact that these are Latinos discriminating against black people is still ultimately discriminating against black people. For Latinos, for most Latinos, I think this is an embarrassment because they feel as immigrants, as brown people, as people who are discriminated against, I think they get it. But this is a problem that has come up before. People who are discriminated against, discriminating against other people. I don't know what the win is here. I don't know, if these three think, oh, well, if we discriminate against black people, the white politicians and the white power structure will like us more. No, they won't like you more. They'll use you more. They'll use you. They won't like you. Just like you don't like the black child of a council member or the black people in the city of Los Angeles. It's frustrating. It really is frustrating, and it's on every level. Okay, Ms. Martinez, Mitch McConnell would be proud of you. Trump would love you. Maybe it's time for you to go to the national stage as a Trumper, and you can get a job next to Marjorie Taylor Greene or Boebert or whatever. I don't know. Remember the good old days when Palin was crazy? Yeah. Anyway, that LA is a mess. We are dealing, like I said, the mayoral election is close. Karen Bass is ahead, but it's probably too close to call. Just like the Senate election in Georgia, too close to call. It's really funny, the Senate election in Georgia, not just that Herschel Walker is a complete clown, but the idea that the evangelical Christians, the white Christian nationalists, the Christian, whatever you want to call them, are voting against a reverend who is a Christian, instead voting for a football player who has, well, we don't know how many kids he has or where they are. We just know he ain't paying for them. But he did pay for an abortion. Yeah. So this, I don't know, man. I don't know. Our process, really quick, I watch football. I'm back to watching football. I'd given it up a while. It is comical to me how many shows there are to analyze football. I honestly can't count them. There's all the shows on the morning of the Sunday morning before the game. There's shows. Then there's shows at halftime. Then there's shows after the game to wrap up the games and look at what the results were and this and that. Then there's the Sunday night game. Then there's another wrap up after the Sunday night game. Then, of course, Monday morning, they review the entire weekend and get ready for Monday Night Football. Then they have the Monday Night Football analysis. And then Tuesday, they analyze what happened over the entire weekend and start preparing for the Thursday game. And on and on and on. Then there's shows of fantasy football and everything else. If we analyzed our politics and our politicians 1/3 as much as we do football and football players, we would have such an educated populace, it would be scary. Politicians would be terrified to be low-life scumbags if we analyzed and watched them as much as football players. Yeah, there's a few low-life scumbags in sports, Brett Favre, but it's the amount of energy put in. And of course, it's all about gambling. It is everything about the NFL. It's all about gambling. They're admitting it now with FanDuel and the other gambling sites. It's very funny that the major gambling sites are all represented by comedians, right? Caesars and MGM and FanDuel represented by comedians. Good for them. Good for them. Make the money. I don't care. It's just, I wish we analyze real stuff, like I say, just 1/3 as much as we analyze sports. But we don't, because sports are a great distraction, and I guess you can't gamble on politics, for God's sake. What, are you going to make a bet on Mitch McConnell? I don't think so. So, as I said, this podcast is sponsored by Green Chef. They just great recipes. So here's the deal with Green Chef, okay? You do need to be a chef. And there's one thing I'm not, it's a chef. But I do have friends who are cooks. I have friends who are chefs. And here's what my friend Aaron said. Aaron got 3 meals: barbecue meatloaf, lemon caper chicken, and Memphis-style turkey bowls. The meals were delicious. The portions were great for 2 people. The prep was easy. He said it's better with 2 cooks. So much for having too many cooks in the kitchen. But 2. And he said, and this is amazing, Aaron said that Green Chef got him to eat zucchini and cauliflower. A huge accomplishment. Aaron's not big on vegetables, okay? But Green Chef makes it easy to cook. It's a great, let me stop talking, okay? Here's what you do. Go to greenchef.com/Alonzo135. Use code Alonzo135. You get $135 off across 5 boxes, and your first box ships for free. All right? It's a great deal. greenchef.com/Alonzo135. Use code Alonzo135. You get $135 off for the first 5 boxes, and your first box ships free. Green Chef, the #1 meal kit for eating well. So, I was talking a little bit about making money and how much help McConnell has been for the super rich. What about the working class? How's the working class doing? There's a slow movement toward unions in America. We're starting to see it again. Starbucks, Amazon, some of these companies, workers are trying to organize and get unions. Here's an interesting thing about being in a union, okay? A study published in Cornell University's Industrial and Labor Relations Review found that workers who are in unions throughout their careers make an average of $1.3 million more than workers who were never in a union. Union members typically make $3.37 million in their lifetime versus $2.08 for non-union. That's a lot of money. That's 60% more. Not to mention working less, getting benefits, etc., etc. So, wow, it's actually a bigger jump. So being in a union is a bigger jump than going to college. Having a college degree, you earn $650,000 to $900,000 more in your lifetime than not having a degree. Being in a union is $1.3 million more. In other words, it's a lot to be said for unions. There's a lot of people who are anti-union, and really, that's all you need to look at. All you need to look at is whenever issues like this come up, who's against it? Who's against it? So if you're looking at unions and you see everyone against it are billionaires, right-wing politicians, CEOs, etc., that means it's probably in your favor to be in a union, right? That's the best thing. And then we have the ridiculous, and this is an extreme, but it is real. It did happen, and it's horrible. Teenagers as young as 13 worked for a parts manufacturer in Alabama. SL Alabama supplies headlights and mirrors for cars, had workers as young as 13. They mainly sell to Kia and Hyundai, but I wouldn't blame Kia and Hyundai on this. They don't necessarily, even though they're responsible, ultimately they can't use these parts. Because of child labor laws, they can't use the parts built by these children once they found out about it. So it's about a month of labor that they were made. But the minimum age for workers in Alabama is 14, and you're not supposed to employ minors under 16 in manufacturing. So they went with 13, so they broke all of these laws. And, like I say, this is an extreme, but it is real. It is real. And the penalty, SL Alabama and JK Staffing is the staffing service, were fined $17,800 each. $35,000 in fines for using child labor to make car parts. That's probably a deal. Probably the amount of money you saved. Again, these are jobs that used to be union jobs. Building cars used to be a union job. And by the way, all of this talk about cars being built in Mexico and Canada and Venezuela, etc. Remember that the southern states did the exact same thing to the northern and midwestern union states. Okay, when car makers and the manufacturers unions, and they were built along the Rust Belt, in Ohio and Indiana and Detroit, Michigan, etc. And the southern states said, hey, come down here. There's no unions. You don't have to pay union workers. And the auto manufacturers moved to places like Tennessee and Alabama and South Carolina, etc. Then they complain about the jobs going to Mexico. Well, you started it. And this is what happens. So now we're looking at, we have all these complaints about child labor in China, and here we have it right here in the United States. I'm going to wrap this podcast up, speaking of labor and money, of something we all wish we did. By the way, just on a side note, my podcast is called Who's Paying Attention, because I've always said the fourth estate, the media, has dropped the ball on questioning people, particularly politicians and people in power. There's a show called The Problem with Jon Stewart. You can watch it on, I believe, HBO Max. You can also watch it through Apple TV or whatever. Just watch it. And watch how Jon Stewart talks to people. And watch how Jon Stewart questions people. Not being disrespectful, but not letting them skate on the lies or on the standard party line. Holding them accountable for what they say. It's really a shame that it takes a comedian to do that. But he is doing it, and he is doing a great job. So check out Jon Stewart on his new show. And I don't know if I said it yet or not, but kudos to Trevor Noah, a great 7 years on The Daily Show, which he said he'll be leaving soon. Now, the last thing I'm going to talk about, since I'm talking about working and making money, on this particular podcast. You ever hear of Apple? You've heard of Apple. We've all heard of Apple. Apple is one of the most recognized trademarks in the world, one of the biggest companies in the world. Well, what if, okay, and you've heard these stories about the people who worked for Microsoft way back when, becoming millionaires when the company grew. Apple's IPO, initial public offering, their first sale of stock, was in 1980. It's 42 years ago. 42 years would be a nice career, right? If you started working at 20, you'd be 62, you'd be eligible to retire. If you started working, say you got out of college at, I don't know, 22, 23 years old. Let's say you found your first job at 23, 42 years, 65, time to retire. Hopefully you got some money, maybe you own a house, equity, whatever it is. Well, what if you had invested in Apple? What if in 1980, when Apple went public, you had invested $10,000 in Apple stock? And by the way, I was working in 1980 and nobody told me to put 10 grand into Apple. What would it be worth? Well, Apple's stock has split a number of times. Split means that your one share becomes two shares, and it splits again, your two become four, etc., etc. This is how it works. It continues to grow. Bottom line, if you invested $10,000 in Apple in 1980, it would be worth $14,246,593 today. Just a little something to think about. If you had put 10 grand in Apple, it would be worth $14 million today. You neither? Yeah, I didn't. Yeah, what are you going to do? Going to keep working. So this weekend, I'm working at 3 East Comedy Club in Colorado Springs. It's a great club, and I will be happy to be there. And next week, I'm going to be doing Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me in Boston. And the Wait, Wait tour is going to go to Michigan. We're going to do Ann Arbor and Kalamazoo. So hopefully I'll see you out there in some live shows. Keep laughing. Who's paying attention? You are, and I thank you for it.